Sometimes you walk into a place and feel it immediately. The noise, the movement, the overlapping conversations, the subtle pressure of bodies moving too close together. Nothing is technically wrong. Everyone else seems comfortable. People are laughing, talking, enjoying themselves. But something in your body tightens. You might look for the nearest exit without even realizing it. You scan the room quickly. Where can you stand without being surrounded? How long do you need to stay before it feels socially acceptable to leave? And if someone notices your discomfort, the explanation people usually give is simple. You're just shy. Maybe you're antisocial. You need to get out more. But that explanation rarely feels accurate, because the strange part is, you might enjoy people. You might enjoy meaningful conversations. One-on-one interactions can feel natural, sometimes even energizing. So the discomfort isn't really about people themselves. Most people assume that when someone dislikes crowds, it's a personality flaw or a social weakness. But that's not actually what's happening. For many people, this reaction is something much quieter and more complex. And once you understand it, the experience starts to make a lot more sense. What we're really talking about is the psychology of people who feel deeply uncomfortable in crowded environments. And despite how common this experience is, it's usually explained in very shallow ways. People often reduce it to introversion or social anxiety. But there's more happening beneath this than most people realize. When the human brain enters a crowded environment, it begins processing an enormous amount of information at once. Faces, voices, body language, movement, sound, emotional signals from dozens of people simultaneously. Your brain doesn't experience a crowd as a single thing. It experiences it as hundreds of small signals happening all at once. And for some nervous systems, that amount of incoming information is simply a lot. Research in neuroscience shows that individuals vary significantly in something called sensory processing sensitivity. Some brains filter external stimulation very efficiently, allowing them to remain relaxed in noisy or complex environments. Other brains process more detail, more emotional cues, and more environmental information, which means a crowded space can feel very different depending on how your nervous system processes stimulation. For someone with lower sensitivity, a busy room may feel lively. For someone with higher sensitivity, the same room can feel overwhelming very quickly. Not because they are weak, not because they are antisocial, but because their brain is literally registering more input. And the nervous system has limits on how much stimulation it can comfortably handle before it begins shifting into alert mode. But here's where it becomes more interesting. Crowd discomfort is not always only about sensory stimulation. Often there is another layer involved: emotional signal processing. Human beings constantly read subtle emotional cues from the people around them: facial expressions, tone shifts, micro-reactions, social tension. Most of this happens below conscious awareness. But some individuals have brains that are unusually tuned to these signals, which means in a crowded space, they are not just hearing noise, they are also unconsciously reading dozens of emotional atmospheres at once. Who feels anxious? Who feels irritated? Who feels guarded? Who feels relaxed? That invisible emotional data adds another layer of mental work. And over time, the brain learns that crowded environments require a lot of energy to navigate, so the body begins anticipating that load before it even happens. You might notice this if you've ever felt slightly tense before entering a crowded place, even when nothing bad has happened there before. Your nervous system remembers the stimulation, and it prepares for it. There's another layer most people miss. Many people who dislike crowds developed a heightened awareness of environments early in life. Sometimes this comes from growing up in emotionally unpredictable households, where reading subtle mood changes helped avoid conflict. Sometimes it develops in children who were naturally observant and introspective. Sometimes it forms simply because a person's nervous system has always processed the world deeply. Over time, the brain becomes very good at scanning environments, very good at detecting subtle shifts, very good at noticing things other people overlook. In quieter settings, this ability can feel like intuition. In crowded settings, it can feel exhausting, because the brain never stops processing. But it's important to say something clearly here. This pattern is not better than other personality styles, and it is not worse. Different nervous systems adapt in different ways to the environments they experience. Some people thrive in high stimulation, high energy environments. Their brains are energized by noise, movement, and social activity. Others regulate themselves best in calmer spaces, with fewer competing signals. Both patterns are normal expressions of human variation. Neither represents a flaw. But there is a counterintuitive layer that many people eventually notice. Some of the same people who feel drained by crowds are also capable of forming unusually deep connections with others, because the same sensitivity that makes crowded environments overwhelming also allows them to notice emotional nuance, subtle tone shifts, small signs that someone is struggling, the quiet signals most people miss. Which means, while crowded spaces can feel draining, meaningful conversations can feel deeply fulfilling. There is a trade-off. The brain that processes more detail also requires more recovery. And once you understand that trade-off, the experience begins to make a lot more sense. What once felt like a social weakness often reveals itself as a nervous system pattern, an adaptation, a way the brain learned to process the world. And when you stop forcing your nervous system into environments that constantly overload it, something interesting happens. You start choosing spaces that allow you to think more clearly, connect more honestly, feel more like yourself. Not smaller, not antisocial, just better aligned with how your mind actually works. Because the discomfort around crowds was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was simply information about how your nervous system experiences the world. And once you see that clearly, the pressure to explain yourself starts to fade. The experience becomes easier to understand, easier to respect, and strangely, easier to navigate. If this resonated with you, there's more to uncover about how your mind works. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe because more interesting content is on the way.